Hello and welcome back to the Data Privacy Lawyer. My name is Funmi Owolabi and I'm the principal attorney at the firm. Today's review is going to be on a cookie statement. So this organization has a cookie policy, last updated 30th of October 2025. So the first thing I'm going to do, I can see that they have other policies and documents here. I want to scroll to the bottom of this cookie policy before we get into the review and see if there is a section where I can update my cookie preferences. Generally, what I'm looking for is there's usually a button at the bottom of these web pages that articulates how to address cookie preferences, but I haven't been presented with that yet. So I'm just going to quickly look. So I'm going to say something about that. I found the preference center, but what I wasn't presented with was I wasn't presented with the banner letting me know, like notice. One of the key foundational principles in the data protection laws is related to notice. If you're going to process any personal data, which a cookie is. That's why we're talking about this on the channel. Everything that we talk about on the channel is in relation to personal data and how personal data impacts an organization. So when I logged into this page, I was not presented with the notice of the fact that these cookies are currently being collected by this organization. Right now, they are tracking my activity and showing me relevant Canva ads. I wasn't presented with notice that this was happening when I logged into this web page. In addition to that, I am a practitioner. That's why I knew to look at this section related to manage cookies. I knew that there would be a preference center because when it comes to my personal data, I should always have the opportunity to exercise my rights as it pertains to my personal data, which is why we're even seeing this manage cookie section. Now, as you can see, these have all been turned on, but I wasn't presented with notice. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I had to search deep into the cookie policy to even identify this section. Providing consent, there are different factors that constitute consent under the data protection law. First of all, it has to be freely given. Second of all, it has to be unambiguous. Third of all, it has to be just as easy to withdraw the consent as it is to give it. At this stage, this organization is collecting information on me that I, one, wasn't presented notice on, and two, they're already collecting it. Now, they have the obligation to present me with a opt-out, meaning in the United States, the obligations on businesses is to present consumers, which I'm a consumer of this site, right? I've just landed on it, and suddenly these cookies are being collected in relation to functionality and personalization for this company. So I'm going to be able to exercise my opportunity to opt out, which I'm always going to do. But it's nice to really look through the flow for organizations. And this is why I think it's really valuable to have privacy counsel review what a business is doing. Because if you are in fact collecting cookies, not presenting notice, and then making it, I would say it wasn't as easy to find the cookies as it was, or to manage my preferences as it was to opt out. The only reason I know that this should exist is because I'm a practitioner. But let's say, for example, you are a consumer of one of their products, Visual Suite. How are you to know that one, cookies are being collected on you, and two, you have the opportunity to manage your cookies if you don't have the level of knowledge associated with what's required under the law? Let's go back to the policy. Now, it may be that that's something that this organization is working on, but it's really important to make sure that your flow works and to periodically review and test what you are demonstrating on your site to your consumers, because I have rights as it pertains to my personal data, and a cookie constitutes personal data under the data protection laws. So there has to be a flow. And something else I want to make mention of is the fact that it's really important for organizations to understand geographical obligations as well, because as you know, in the United States, we've had many US state privacy legislations that have been enacted in the last 6 or 7 years. So validating that your cookie consent flow works on your site is imperative, because it's definitely something that regulators are looking out for organizations to see whether or not their privacy practices align with what's done in practice. What you're doing internally and what you are representing on your site needs to align with what it is you're doing in practice. And as we've seen in practice, I had to scroll down to exercise my cookie preferences. The other thing that I wasn't able to verify is generally that cookie banner that appears. If you watched any of my cookie reviews in the past, I always validate the information that's provided in the cookie banner with what's presented in the preference center. And so if these are the cookies that the site is going to be collecting, there should be options related to individuals for those that are non-essential to exercise their preference on whether or not the site collects this type of information. So all three have to go hand in hand. This notice on the site, the banner, and the preference center. What I'm really trying to look for is whether or not this organization addresses the fact that notice needs to be provided first. I'm not sure if that will be in this particular cookie policy, but I do think it's valuable to see what the flow should look like. Now, I will say another thing, that geography really impacts how a consent management process works out, meaning how cookies are rolled out in some geographies is going to be different in other geographies. Now, for many of the reviews that I've conducted in the past, companies haven't identified their geographies, which is why this is just general insight based on public-facing documents. I don't know the ins and outs of this organization, but the value in reviewing them is, one, letting businesses know what sorts of things to look out for, and two, how to improve your own privacy practices so that you're able to meet your obligations under the data protection laws. Okay, so I really hope you enjoyed this particular review. If you have comments about what I've stated, leave a comment below and I'll see you in another review.